To this. Okay, we're recording the meeting now. Yes, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Ronald Askeland. He's the vice chair of our chapter's executive committee, and he's also the chair of the conservation committee and the zero waste subcommittee. So he's very busy and a very involved Sierra Club volunteer. Ron worked at Hewlett Packard for 35 years, and he has a PhD in analytical chemistry. I personally have been very impressed with Ron's effectiveness. One example is Ron took a local San Diego Sierra Club position opposing synthetic turf that some of our Oceanside volunteers were very involved with that issue. And he took it to the state Sierra Club, and they adopted a similar position. And then he took it to the National Sierra Club. And so that was very impressive work. And I'm very pleased I'm looking forward to his presentation. So Ron, please.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Barb, and Sally. Thanks for inviting me. Senator Blakespear and Matt have a good excuse for not being here. They're going to be up at 4 o'clock tomorrow doing a homeless survey. So that's kind of interesting. So yeah, as Barb mentioned, I worked for Hewlett Packard for 35 years, and I'd been coming to Sierra Club meetings for all that time, but only a little before I retired, when the pandemic hit, did I really start getting involved in volunteering. And then as soon as you start volunteering, they like you to do more and more. So it's been a good experience, that's for sure. Let me go ahead and share.
I just want to point out to everybody too, we will have time afterwards with both presenters to take questions and whatnot. So, but certainly if there's anything that comes up, feel free to put it in the chat.
All right, so you folks are lucky enough. This is kind of a dry run for the Zero Waste Symposium. That'll be on February 26th. Actually, Senator Blakespear will be speaking there too. I'll be speaking only 10 minutes about zero waste, but it'll be a really nice, I think they've done this about 14, 15 years in a row, driven by Zero Waste San Diego. So my main focus tonight will be the Waste and Toxic Materials Reduction Program, where we want to support education, recycling, composting, and durable goods recovery efforts. So a little bit about our committee. We're part of the San Diego Chapter Conservation Committee. We meet the first Monday of the month at 6:30 via Zoom. And then every quarter in the High Sierra newsletter, we publish Zeroing In on Zero Waste, Your Questions Answered. So it's been fun for me to learn how to write, have people ask questions, and do some research to figure out what the right answers are for them. So it's been a fun experience. So these are 8 goals that we have for the coming year. I'll talk a lot about goal 1, so I won't say much about it here. Certainly, methane reduction is really important. It's the 80 times more problematic than CO2 over the first 20 years of emissions. And so we're really trying to work with getting organics out of the landfills to stop getting methane generated in the landfills, and then some work with edible food recovery. As Barb mentioned, we hate synthetic turf. It's a terrible thing. We could talk for a half an hour or longer on synthetic turf. I guess my experience is a little frustrating. So I specifically volunteered to be the vice chair of the chapter, so I could go to the leaders, the CCL, where you get to bring up resolutions. The anti-synthetic turf resolution sailed through that meeting. Ben Jealous and I talked about it a little bit. His kid was playing on synthetic turf. And then actually ran into some problems with the National Sierra Club. So I don't know if some of you got some of the emails, but we were kind of pushing back. So we'll see how that goes. Folks here in San Diego, And most of the people I've worked with want an absolute, completely against synthetic turf policy. We're running into some problems with some of the people in National Sierra Club. So we'll see how it all works out. We certainly are against the use of pesticides, especially around schools. So we've been working on that. In the city of San Diego, we help push through Measure B, which allows the city to actually charge for trash collection, and that'll give them a chance to kind of revamp the whole thing. You know, we've got the black barrel, the green barrel, and the blue barrel, and we can do better than we are right now. There's also a ban on polystyrene foam and single-use plastics, and we're helping. Sometimes I kind of rat people out to the city of San Diego. Rubio's is a great example. They were still not giving you a choice. They were just giving you the plastic silverware, and now in their app, you have to opt in to get the plastic silverware. So that's what we want. We want people to have to opt in to get things like plastic utensils, because there's no possible way to recycle those. We've been doing some nice work with San Diego State University on tobacco, cannabis, and e-cigarette waste. There are 4 trillion tobacco filters that end up in the landscape every year, and it's a major problem. They're just launching a program down by Mission Bay to track cannabis and cigarette waste, and then pair that with actual science of measuring nicotine and other substances in there. So if anybody would like to talk about that sometime, it's pretty exciting. Our team has been working pretty closely with Senator Blakespear. It's kind of tricky. You know how there's 13 chapters in California, so we kind of have to coordinate with State Sierra Club when it's statewide issues. But Matt and the rest of Senator Blakespear's staff has been just tremendous. So really great opportunity to work with them. And then the last one is trying to phase out gas-powered leaf blowers. And the county's climate action plan is really quite good. It's not quite as fast as we want, but they're phasing out the gas-powered lawn equipment. One leaf blower, getting one leaf blower that's gas-based out of commission, replacing it with electric, let's say, is equivalent to getting over 90 cars off the road for smog. So think about that. Get rid of one leaf blower from a smog effect, it's the same as getting 90 cars off the road. In the US in general, pollution from leaf blowers is equal to 100 million cars. So they're very inefficient because they have this 2-stroke gasoline motor, and it burns oil. And so it's just a terrible, terrible thing. So when we kind of, if you look at these 8 things, they really come a lot from the people that are on the team. What are their hot spots? If folks know Suzanne Hume and John from Clean Earth for Kids, they're very influential in our group. And of course, we have Rick Anthony. I'll talk about that a little bit later, but he has 50 years of experience in this area. So getting to our main objective for the year, we'd really like to pass a waste and toxic materials reduction program, combining Sierra Club San Diego with Zero Waste San Diego, and we'll be building a coalition across the county. And really what we want to do is a lot of education to encourage waste and toxic materials reduction, get this information out about the harmful effects of these toxic substances, and support recycling, composting, and durable goods recovery efforts. And so this can be done under current law. The County of San Diego has what's called an AB 939 disposal fee, and we'd like to raise that by $1 per ton. And that would generate about $3.4 million annually. It could be used for these programs. And there's very good effective programs in Alameda, San Mateo, and Santa Clara counties already. So we think adopting this program would really contribute to San Diego County's climate, circularity, and sustainable materials goals. The proposal would be that the county would be responsible for regional waste reduction and toxic pollution prevention policies. They would be the ones overseeing the budget and would track progress towards their goals. And so I think what will happen is we'll bring this before the County Board of Supervisors. I'm sure there'll be some exchanges back and forth, but we figured it's better to lay out a proposal with some specifics rather than just have a blank sheet of paper, I guess. So some of the things that it could be used for is really doing a better job with SB 1383. So that's the state law that says you have to put your food waste into the green bins for composting. There's been a lot of problems with apartment complexes and condos that don't supply this, or they don't do a very good job of it. And so there's a lot of work to kind of convince people this is the right thing to do. I have two daughters. One is, just really on top of it. Always, any food waste, we always take it out. My other daughter is like, I don't have time. So I have education even with my own family, I guess. Certainly, by keeping organic waste out of the landfills, it'll help on methane emissions. Composting is good for soil enrichment. You don't have to have more landfill space because you can definitely extend the life of it. I think there's a lot of concern, at least on my part, on how much toxic material gets into the landfill that shouldn't be there. I was just reading a thing today from the Samuel Air Pollution Control District, how the Otay landfill has an arsenic problem, and they think it's from collecting gases that build up in landfills that are flammable. They burn these gases off, and then apparently arsenic gets into the environment. So I'm just reading about that today. We also think, there's a real chance to have more durable goods recovery. How much stuff going into the landfill could be recycled, or we always just give stuff away. We have something we don't want anymore, a table, a chair, we put it out on the street and it's often gone the next day. There's a lot of things like online resources to help give away things, like Pay Nothing is one of the online resources for it. We think there also could use this money to do some types of grants or loans to small businesses. For example, one of the biggest problems you talk to restaurants is dishwashing. They just love having disposable stuff because it's too much of a hassle. Well, is there some way to subsidize them? And of course, we all know how much we hate shrink wrap. It shows up everywhere. It contaminates our food with microplastics. And so I think there's a lot that could be done in repairs. I don't know if you guys know about the Fix-It clinics around the county. There's some really nice events. I'm going to bring my air compressor to one of them. I want somebody that knows what to do to help me fix it. Let's see. Just talking a little bit more about current legislation. So it's really California has told people they have to do certain things with their waste streams, but they don't really fund it very well. So how do we achieve a state mandated 75% recycling and composting without good communication? So one of the things we'd like to do with the money raised by this proposal is this type of education. And they've been very successful, as I mentioned, in at least 3 other counties. So kind of a summary, we have 8 key goals for 2025. The waste and toxic materials reduction programs are our top one. Ways people could get involved. One is attend the Zero Waste Symposium. That'll be on February 26th. You could submit questions for the High Sierra newsletter. We love getting questions, and it forces us to do some research on giving a good answer. And would also love to have people attend the Zero Waste Subcommittee Zoom meeting. That's the first Monday of the month at 6:30. Amelie is usually there, so I really appreciate that. I've got an email address up here to contact me. And here's our group. So as I mentioned, Rick Anthony is just an amazing person. He's been in this industry for over 50 years. About 2 years ago, he actually addressed the United Nations. So they flew him to New York, and they had a national, what was it called? International Recycling Day, I think it was called. No, International Day of Zero Waste, that's what it was. And so Rick spoke there. uh, and other members of our team are Lisa, Diane, Doris, Suzanne and John, Pat Holland, and Amelie. So I think that's it. So very welcome to take some questions.
Yeah, Ron, if you can, I'm having a hard time seeing the whole group.
Yeah,
So,
I'll stop here so we can see some folks.
yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Mark, I see you had a question. Do you want to ask it or I can read it in the chat?
Well, I'm happy to ask it. I noticed that in your list of cigarettes, cannabis, and the vaping stuff, it seemed to me like cannabis is a pretty minor problem by itself. I mean, I know the vaping stuff, people just toss it all the time, but is cannabis really a problem? I mean, in what way is that effect?
Well, I mean, working with the San Diego State folks, certainly 90% of the waste you see is cigarette butts. So it's definitely a higher percentage. The thing I hate about cannabis, especially if it's done illegally, is they just do some horrible things to the environment. Uh, Pesticides,
Yeah.
herbicides, fertilizer. So that's the downside of it. And well, I don't know. There's a group every time you go to the county board of supervisors, there's a group of about 4 or 5 people that talk about cannabis, and you know, I understand wanting to legalize it, but it's really bad for young people's brains. But anyway, my
So,
thoughts.
so, so the cannabis itself, I mean, how often do you see a little cannabis butt thrown on the ground? Not
Hardly ever. Yeah, we've been working. So the San Diego State folks had developed a phone app, and so you go and take a picture of it. It uses GPS coordinates to show where it is. You can enter some information about what it is, and then you clean it up too. And yeah, well over 90% is cigarette butts. That's for sure. You know,
One
maybe one interesting fact. So they did a study in about 6 different municipalities in a certain area. They monitored all the mostly tobacco waste there, and they came back a couple months later. And the scary thing was, it was 90% as much there 2 months later as before they picked it up. So even though you clean it up, 2 months later, most of it's back again. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
One thing I was going to say is our North County coastal cities, especially Encinitas, Solana Beach, Del Mar, I believe, is it Carlsbad and Oceanside as well, have been very aggressive on plastics, balloons, all that kind of stuff, and have passed ordinances about that. The big issue, which Ron alluded to, is enforcement. It's a tattletale world we live in, right down to gas-powered lawn equipment and all that kind of stuff, which is also banned, I know, in Encinitas. And what I want to point out, and then we'll get to these other questions, is one goal of ours at the Coasters Group would be to have a team for our North County coastal area that focuses just on zero waste and can help, push the initiatives through with all the cities and awareness and whatnot. So that's something we can look forward to. Just while we're answering these questions, Ron, can you pop your contact info into the chat before we're done?
Sure. And
And
then just a
then
comment. I think something that's really exciting about the coasters is you're kind of on the leading liberal edge. You can kind of get things done that it's going to take a lot longer to get to the eastern part of the county. And so I think that's pretty exciting.
yes, exactly. John Eldon.
Yeah, a few things. So first off, the issue of leaf blowers came up, one of my favorite topics. And the other people are noting in chat as well that enforcement seems to be pretty lax. I go to the Y Tuesday mornings at 6 and the gardeners are out there leaf blowing, and then on campus, well, UCSD is not in Encinitas, but within the Encinitas, there's a lot of gardeners that are still using the gas blowers. So that's one. So that raises the whole enforcement thing. Then the other on the plastic utensils at takeout. I eat at croutons once a week, and they knee jerk. They have a big sign, only on request,
Yeah.
and then it's always there. And if I catch them soon enough making my order, I don't need that. I flash my fork and say I don't need that. And then the other one I wanted to mention, I put it in chat as well. I've been active in these local iFixit clinic things, and one of my big passions is right to repair. So
Yeah.
when you buy any consumer good, right to have schematic diagrams, repair instructions, and make the damn thing repairable, right? So you can actually disassemble and replace things like lithium batteries, which have a limited lifetime. So that's one of my big passions is this right to repair. We really need a major consumer push on that because there's so much stuff that goes to the landfill that really didn't have to. So anyway,
Yeah.
that's my,
Yeah,
that's my, yeah.
I think a follow-up will be after this meeting, when we follow up with the recording and whatnot, would be to include also, Ron, your fix-it, all the little fix-it things that happen around the county where you can
Yeah.
bring things and smarter people can help fix them if you
Yeah,
can.
we do those. They rotate around the county, so I'm involved in
Yeah.
one of those. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Vanessa.
Oh, one comment for John. Do you feel the law that was passed recently in California for right to repair is adequate?
Not quite. It's a good start. I mean, we need more of that, but consider also that if your car is more than 20 years old, the dealerships won't touch it.
Wow.
And I keep my cars, like my Passat's 24 years old. I'm not parting with it. So, fortunately, a lot of the independent mechanics will, and I do a lot of my own wrenching. So for me, it hasn't been a problem yet. But it's two issues. It's not only the expertise to repair, either educating a consumer or enabling somebody who's expert in that field to do it. It's also availability of spare parts. And that's another
Right.
big issue on this.
Okay.
But a lot
Okay.
of stuff, particularly cars, and appliances just get scrapped when they don't need to be.
Yeah, I want to make sure we get to a couple of the other questions. Vanessa, I think you were up next.
I just wanted to ask, we do the green waste recycling, of our scraps and stuff. And how is it determined what impact that's having? You know what I'm saying? Is there like some way that they're, measuring what doesn't go into the landfill, comparing it with the past? Um, I just feel like it it's really hard to argue points when we don't have collection of information to see what impact some of these measures have. And I do want to just say, I think Carlsbad, they are actually doing a good job of working with businesses and going out and explaining, how they can get other, purchase other things that are not like styrofoam containers and things like that. That the new laws, it is working with businesses and explaining, and us, as was mentioned, consumers not to accept getting plastic to take out their food, right?
Yeah, yeah. I did talk to some people with the city of San Diego, and they do some auditing because I was kind of asking them, how do you tell how successful it is? And they'll do some auditing of loads going to the dump.
There is, and there's also a group. There was just a really interesting thing on NPR the other day that was talking about a whole team of scientists that are studying ways that they can capture, the gases that are coming out of the landfills. And so they can study, how it's working, improvements to what's happening. And if I can find that, it was so interesting because it answered that question about, it seems in your head it's right, but how do you know it's really working? One other thing, and then Maria, I see your hand is up. I see a lot of people asking about enforcing. I will say specifically in Encinitas, it is a tattle on your neighbor enforcement policy. And, which means if you're nice, you go to your neighbor first and talk to them and say, hey, maybe you could get an electric blower for your gardener as well as other equipment, lawnmowers, all of that. If they resist, then you can report them to the city and then they come out and cite them. And yeah, it's not ideal. It's not ideal. Marie.
There. Thank you, Ron, for your presentation. So my name is Marie. I'm an electric vehicles program specialist, program manager. I'm passionate about fighting global warming. That is my purpose in life right now. So I'm very passionate about composting as well. And in Oceanside, we have a great program residentially, and they convert it into soils. We have the whole like El Corazon place where you get the soil and everything. But why aren't in the restaurants, why aren't there green bins? I don't understand why
Yeah.
they have it for residential, but it's not happening in the restaurants. And
Yeah,
is that still hard to do?
well, it's happening. So I had been, I think I was at the Sacramento airport where they have green bins. So I asked the city of San Diego folks, why don't we have a green bin at the airport? And they said, people in the airport, the customers don't get it right. And then he said, behind the scenes, all of the restaurants are doing it. So apparently, not the waste the customer gets, but the waste that the restaurant generates in its normal business does make it into the composting.
Oh, but not the consumers, not the customer.
That's my understanding. The consumer stuff at most restaurants does not make it in. Nobody sorts it.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Thanks.
I do see, Bob, you had a question in the chat regarding popcorn packaging, white styrofoam, all of that lovely stuff. Do you have a update on what the status of that is in terms of can it be recycled?
I don't know. So the city and the county, what I'm learning, so I'm on, Rick Anthony actually chairs this group. It's a citizens advisory committee with the county and the municipalities on waste. And so we meet once a month. And I forget the city or the county, one of them does recycle some of the styrofoam, but it's really hard. We just need to stop using it. That's the key. What's so frustrating to me is that you take a disposable coffee cup and 99% of them have a coating on them and you can't compost them. And so it's very frustrating that goes in the landfill just because of the components in it. But yeah, it can't get recycled and it can't get composted because it's got that plastic layer on it.
Yeah, I think there's two different kinds, right? There's the regular white styrofoam, and then now some of the more forward people think of the starch pellets that are biodegradable, and those can be composted, but it's the old school white peanuts that are, that show up from Amazon or whomever the shipper is. I can't blame Amazon, but whoever the shipper is includes that, plus some of the packaging would have the stiff foam around the product. And I guess we just have to put that into in Encinitas, our gray trash bins, right?
Yeah. What we do for our Sierra Club picnics is bamboo cups. They're very nicely compostable.
Okay, last question, and then we're going to move on to the next presenter, Bob.
Yeah, thanks. So I know this is always a challenge. Like when restaurants do have the 3 bins and you look in the compost bin, just a second. Ian, I'm talking to some people. Can you get out, please? Sorry. 4-year-olds getting ready to go to bed. So I know that they have trouble keeping trash out of the compost bin. If you ever look in there, it's just like full of trash. People don't sort it. And so I guess for our group, it seems like this is someplace where community outreach and like outreach to schools in particular might be helpful. Is there some of that going on? Like, getting people to start doing it at home, getting used to it so that then they, uh, you know, it's more of a habit. Then they start asking for it at restaurants and do it from the ground up instead of, if you just put the bins out right now, as you see in places when you go there, it's filled with trash. So is there outreach going on anywhere that we can get involved with to try to?
That's part of the reason of trying to have a surcharge of $1 a ton for waste going to landfill to use that money for something like that. I wonder if it's also, are aluminum cans less likely to turn up in the trash? I'm wondering if there's like an evolution that people, as they learn, but I love this idea of talking to kids and education early on. I think that's a great idea.
Well, yeah, I just know that in a lot of cases, that's who teaches the family, right? You have kids in school and then they scold their parents for putting the aluminum can in the trash can, and then that works its way up, and over time, everybody's doing it.
Right.
Yep.
Exactly. Well, again, Ron, if I'm not sure if you got your contact info out there, but as one of the follow-ups to this meeting, we'll definitely, include that and some of the great ideas. I love the toolkit, for outreach. We've talked about that a lot, and honestly, it's just come down to a manpower issue. So, Vanessa. The hazards of coming up with a great idea is we might reach out to you to see if that's something you might want to help us work on, because that would be great.
Sure, I'll bring Paige and Bob on it too. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Be great.
So our next presenter, we're just getting her presentation. Kathy, I don't know if you saw my message. For some reason, I can't share on my computer. There's some weird setting I haven't been able to find. So, Barbara, do you have her presentation? Wait, you're on mute.
Yes, I have it. And I know Amelie had mentioned having it. So either one of us could just.
Well, she has it, Kathy, has it been updated? Is what you sent earlier today?
It's what I sent you earlier, yeah.
Okay, that's perfect. Yeah,
So,
then
Cassie, do you prefer to share yourself the presentation, or do you want to?
No, I have the same problem Sally does of like getting things to load and when I try to share them. So
okay.
So while we're getting the presentation up and going, let me just introduce Kathy Dervin. It's not often that we have someone speak from Sierra Club California Executive Committee, so we're really thrilled to have Kathy here tonight. As you can imagine, it's been a super busy week for our California team. Obviously, lots going on. Too many threats probably to even go through, but by way of introduction, Kathy is on our California Executive Committee and also a member of our Conservation Committee. She's an experienced consultant with a demonstrated history of working in the public policy industry. She's skilled in policy analysis, public speaking, research, community outreach, and project management. She's a strong consulting professional with a master's in public health, focused in health education, environmental health, from the University of Michigan. So, it's funny, we spoke initially before the inauguration and it was like, oh yeah, we can go through this. And now it's like, how do you distill all this information down? So thank you for being here and jumping off of your other meeting to accommodate our schedule. So.
Sure, thank you. Actually, I got kind of offered up by your Pam Hetherington, who's a new member of the State Executive Committee from the San Diego chapter. So I can either thank her or blame her.
Yes, and by the way, we're thrilled to have someone from San Diego on the California Executive Committee now. So that's really
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, so thank you. Nice to see you all. So if we were in a room together, I would tell everybody to take a deep breath and before we launch into this and look around the room and see who's here, because that's who's going to be our support network as we kind of move into this new phase of the the second Trump administration. So I put this presentation together for the XCOM retreat on January 11th. And I just said, well, I'll put some things together about Trump's threats to California. And it was like just a 10 or 12-minute thing. So it's evolved a little bit from there because now we're into the first week of seeing what is really going to be happening. So, I'm do a little bit of overview of what's happening at the national level. I'm sure a number of you are following this also. I was following this from after the election, going to a lot of these national debriefing, post-election webinars and briefings with a lot of different groups. And one group I'm on, which is called the CO2 Plenary, which deals with carbon capture and storage, is a national group. And they did a presentation like this about maybe a week after the election, and were very, very accurate in some of the predictions they made for how this was going to play out. So just thanks to the folks there that helped out. Am I going to be able to advance these? No?
No,
Doesn't look like it.
no,
Okay,
you're gonna
so
tell me.
next slide.
Okay.
So I did add a little bit more cartoons and humor in just to kind of just keep us a little bit balanced. So this was kind of what we were thinking about again before this even started. Who's going to be running the government? Fox News, the fossil fuel industry, and Elon Musk. And they do have a lot of power. So that's who we're part of the partnership of this new administration. There's a lot of other players who have been dreaming of these changes for probably 25 or 30 years and now get to execute them. Next slide. So what did Trump promise and what have we begun to see carried out? I had heard there were going to be 50 executive orders. I think we're up to 200 at this point. That's not unusual. Presidents usually do a lot of executive orders on their first week or so, but this one, really is kind of going pretty far in both reversing a lot of Biden's executive orders, which of course don't have the weight of law, so you can't necessarily sue about an executive order. But if you're reversing something that the previous president did. So some of those are legal and some will be blocked. Some are probably just like trial balloons of like, let's just put this out there. And really some of the top tier ones are deporting, millions of immigrants that are in our communities across the country. And some of the things that they did take, that Trump has said he was going to do: no climate change, no EV goals, no electric appliances. He doesn't like them. He doesn't like windmills. And he doesn't like water saving because you need more water to take a shower. So that's just the mentality that goes along with this. But then we get into kind of seeing things that he did in his first term, withdrawing from the Paris Agreement and the UNFCCC, the UN Convention on Climate Change, and his message of drill, baby, drill. Also massive budget cuts, which we're seeing in the government even now with, you probably all heard that the cut of the pause of federal spending across 2,600 different programs was reversed today. The OMB said, the Office of Management and Budget said, oh, no, we didn't really mean that. Plus it was held up by a judge. So we're going to see a lot of kind of trying things out and see what they can get away with in these different areas. We are going to have a promise of massive government cuts, whether that's laying off employees, like the offer of early retirement or resignation for those federal employees that were working remotely, which is a lot of them, both in Congress, out of the White House, and with the new Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE. And a lot of those cuts are going to go to make up tax cuts for wealthy people and corporations. We're going to see deregulation. I mean, these again are things that they promised. They're going to go after blue states like California, sanctuary cities, and we're already seeing evidence of that. And we're going to make America healthy again. I'm a retired public health official, so I've been paying a lot of attention to public health issues, and RFK's confirmation hearing today, where I think he kind of blew up a little bit in his responses to the senators. Next slide. So just breaking down the federal government, obviously a lot of this is going to be run out of the White House as much as they can, taking over the responsibilities of the three branches of government. And that will be kind of chaos, maximum disruption, and really everything Trump says, I consider to be pretty much a lie. So, and just some really outrageous, are they trial balloons? Are they real? Are they serious? Taking over Greenland, Panama Canal, Canada, Mexico, changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. Not clear where DOGE is going to be run out of. It really doesn't exist as a agency in government, so could be run out of the White House. Then we have the regulatory agencies, which are already experiencing threats from DEI, diversity, anything having to do with gender. They're firing people in some of those programs, or letting them go. Whether they have union protection or not, we'll have to see. And then the regulatory agencies themselves, as we can see by the political appointees being recommended to be in the cabinet to run them, are corrupted. I mean, many of them have no experience in what they're being assigned to do, or they are purposely being put there to unravel and undo the work of those agencies. Some of this will be weaponized against communities, workers, and advocates in some of the key agencies. And the big concern about data, information that the federal government collects, analyzes, will be, some of it was removed almost immediately. And I'll give you an example of that. The courts, so the Supreme Court, we already know where it's been since the majority was taken over when Trump's first term with his nominees there. But just to give one example of how this can play out. So in June, there was a case called the Chevron defense, which was an interpretation of statute laws that Congress passes, handing off to regulatory agencies where they would then interpret the statute and make more detailed regulatory findings and adopt regulations. So that was overturned. And in the meantime, a case was bubbling up from, of all places, San Francisco, over water pollution from the sewer system in San Francisco. But that was happening before the Chevron defense. After the Chevron defense, that case became a big problem because San Francisco was trying to appeal a Clean Water Act ruling by EPA and saying that it shouldn't apply to us. So that has now fallen into this Chevron defense post-Chevron defense Supreme Court. And this one case coming from San Francisco could end up challenging, unraveling key parts of the National Clean Water Act. So we can't take anything for granted. The lower courts can be, plus or minus depending on the case and who hears them. And then we have Congress, which, they're claiming that they have huge mandate. Actually, there's a very small margin in the House and the Senate. And so that's going to play out. Hopefully they'll fight amongst themselves and disagree between how conservative or very conservative you are, or how MAGA you are. And we know already the early big bills that they're planning to push are an energy bill, a reconciliation bill, which could fold everything into it, and getting to these tax cuts for billionaires and corporations. Next slide. So just for our purposes tonight, looking at a few of the agencies and departments that we would deal with on environmental justice, public health issues, broadly kind of looked at. So department, I mean, you can, it is the fossil fuel industry has a fair amount of representation. People that are sycophants to Trump and the MAGA movement are being rewarded for that. There's several Fox News people that are being proposed for cabinet secretaries. There's this America First Policy Institute has 2 people in both housing and urban development, and USDA, which of course covers forestry and all the agriculture programs. And then particular, problem at the Office Management and Budget with this guy, Russell Vogt, who came from the Heritage Foundation. He was one of the key authors of Project 2025. Next slide. And those folks are at various stages of being heard in the Senate for confirmation. Then the other thing that happened almost immediately is information started disappearing from federal websites and their organizational, presence. So I just pulled one out from the Department of Transportation. Here's on one day, there was a climate landing page talking about climate and sustainability in DOT. The next day, nothing, gone, not present. Next slide. And that's across the federal agencies, you'll find the same thing. So one of the strategies of these folks is really I had to go back and actually read a little bit about Orban in Hungary to understand how a dictator and a fascist government comes into play and takes over everything. Hungary is small compared to the United States, but they actually are using some of the very same strategies. And one of them is taking over the media or pushing the media to comply and to not serve their better purposes. So we are seeing legacy media. This was already happening, but it's being advanced and escalated now. Legacy media is losing viewers, and they're already self-moderating their coverage. Their self-censorship. We saw that in the Washington Post and the LA Times. Removing their not endorsing Kamala Harris. And, we've seen changes in Meta and Facebook. So this is being consolidated in a bad way. So we have to pay attention to that. I think Musk and maybe other people have said they really want to get rid of public broadcast. And that funds a lot of community media across the country. And then there's, going on the offense against the media is if you say something bad, we're going to attack you. So Trump did try to sue the Des Moines Register, where a pollster 2 weeks before the election tried to say that Kamala Harris was leading in the polls in Iowa. She wasn't, and it was wrong, but the person shouldn't be sued just because they put a poll out. And this onslaught of disinformation is something we're going to have to live with and figure out how to, sort through and deal with. Because you've probably heard these words again, chaos, a fire hose of information, so much that it's there's all this activity coming at you. What's real? What's important to focus on? What you let go of and not get caught up in. So that's one of the coping strategies we're going to have to figure out. And there have been some little signs of revolt. Reddit, I'm not on Reddit, but I read that Reddit had when Elon Musk did that kind of Nazi salute at a campaign, at an event, people on Reddit said, no more links to X or Twitter on Reddit. They're gone, they're out of here. So that was interesting. A lot of people are moving to Blue Sky, and we are seeing new media. 2 people that left the Washington Post out of sheer disgust went and started a new thing called the Contrarian. So we're in this moment of a lot of, pressure and threat being put on the media, and we have to see kind of how that's going to reshape itself. So for us, how will our communities and activists get and disseminate real information, real accurate information for action? So that's just a question I'm kind of hanging out there because that's important to our work. And just wanted to, since Jim Acosta left CNN today, he said on his parting shot, don't give in to the lies, don't give in to fear, hold on to the truth and hope. That was his parting words leaving CNN. Next slide. I'm not gonna read all the rest of these slides, or we'll be here all night. So what does it mean for nonprofits, tribes, political organizations? So the Sierra Club, if you don't know, has already been specifically targeted by Trump and Musk. On January 11th, Musk tweeted, defund Sierra Club to all of his however many hundreds of millions of followers, and blame the Sierra Club for the Los Angeles fires because of our policy on trees. There's also a bill that a lot of groups have been following called HR 9495. This passed in Congress in December. It hasn't passed in the Senate, so it would need to be reintroduced. But this would allow the IRS to go after 501c3s like ourselves, or 501c4s, using very, very broad terrorism charges. So that's a concern a lot of nonprofit groups have in our following. Funding challenges. We may, from the government, where any of our organizations or programs that we work with get government funds and grants on climate, environment, EJ, anything having to do with DEI and justice or race are probably going to be blocked or gone. And we don't yet know exactly what's going to happen to the Inflation Reduction funding, which we were, of course, counting on to carry out a lot of the solution-oriented clean energy, clean transportation, housing, decarbonization, things like that. So some of it's going to be clawed back, but some of it's actually already reached the states. So hopefully we can, and California has gotten a big chunk of that for heat pumps and building decarbonization. There's also threats to donors, corporations, and foundations. And you may have seen a list of some of the foundations that are saying, oh, we don't want to do diversity, equity, inclusion anymore. Or we don't want to do, like BlackRock, one of the biggest financial companies in the world, said, well, we don't really want to do that ESG, that sustainability principles in our funding and our spending. But some are recommitting themselves to those things. So
here we go.
Yeah.
Cool.
Then we're going to see a new role for the police and the military, and even businesses attacking activists. So there's something called a SLAP suit against Greenpeace by Energy Transfer, which built the Dakota Access Pipeline, for $350 million, which would pretty much knock out globally Greenpeace's budget if it was successful. It was filed in North Dakota. Unfortunately, California doesn't allow SLAP suits. But we are going to see the police used against protesters, even the military. We just don't know yet. So that poses a big issue for those of us who organize rallies and marches and protests or direct nonviolent action. And then just to think about the impact of all of this on our working conditions for our staff and volunteers. There's going to be mental health issues, and just them processing all this information while they're trying to carry out the work that we're asking them to do. And all of our communities are going to continue to see climate impacts. I mean, the LA fires are the biggest example, but we're all susceptible to those. And it means we need to look at, how we respond to that organizationally and as a community with support, solidarity, and especially in coalitions with many, many other groups. Security, I'm not going to go into, but that's the issue also for our organizations, how you share information so that it can't be accessed by nefarious forces. Next slide. National Sierra Club, I'm just going to say a couple things about this because one, I'm not an expert on what they're doing. You've probably all been getting emails from different programs at National, but one of their main strategies is really litigation. They are working with other environmental, progressive, civil society, civil rights, political organizations to use their legal staff to sue. And in the first Trump term, they did file 300 lawsuits. So that can overturn these measures that Trump is trying to move forward with, or slow them down, or cause problems for them. So that's actually all I'm going to say about National. You can have these slides and read the rest, but there's a lot of opportunities there if you're interested in National work to see what they're up to. Next slide, please. But we're in California, right? So we're okay. Well, Yes, we are a blue state, but already we've seen a Trump executive order on water in California, taking emergency measures to provide water resources to California and improve disaster response. I mean, the write-up of these executive orders is quite over the top in some ways. And Trump insisted that the reason Los Angeles ran out of water pressure was that Northern California wasn't sending enough water to Los Angeles, which is not true. The reservoirs in Los Angeles are almost all full and have like 3-year supply of water. It was an internal water pressure going up elevation in a fire that was unprecedented for the amount of water that needed to be drawn. Anyway, it was ridiculous, but that's a threat, and that's causing problems for California. And some of the water they want to release is never going to get it to Southern California. It's going to go to large corporate farms owned by hedge funds in the Western San Joaquin Valley. So that's a water battle that our state water committee is working on. And also the threat to withhold or conditioning federal disaster aid to California, whether it's for fires or floods or whatever, is very serious because these things exceed even California's ability to come up with funding to recover and rebuild. Next slide. Okay, so Trump started very early attacking California and Newsom, in part because of the fire gave him an opportunity to do that. I mean, this is probably a $260 billion cost to rebuild and recover from the LA fire. But Attorney General Rob Bonta, I'm following him pretty closely, is really ready to file lawsuits. He's already filed a couple, and one on immigration and one on these cuts to all the programs that was reversed today. And the state legislature did give the Attorney General more than $25 million in December. And I think just this week, or maybe today, they're giving him some more money to get him in position to file those lawsuits and support all that legal work. Again, the IRA funding was really essential for us to fund a lot of the California has solutions. We know what we're trying to do. We have a plan for climate. We have a plan for many environmental and land use problems, but we do need money. And we'll have to see how much of that's going to be available. The building decarbonization money, a lot of it is at the California Energy Commission right now being disseminated for like heat pumps, especially to low and moderate income people. Clean transportation, we really rely on the EPA to help us. We have to apply to the EPA to get Clean Air Act waivers so that California can have stronger policies in place on clean transportation than the rest of the country has because of our legacy of poor air quality in California. So there were 8 of these waivers sitting for some of them for a year or two at EPA. 6 were approved, 2 were withdrawn by CARB, and they have to do with advanced clean fleets and clean locomotives, moving away from diesel locomotives. Our public transit, I don't know what it looks like from San Diego, but in the Bay Area and other places, rural areas, public transit is in a world of hurt, and there's not going to be any federal funding for that, either public transit now or cleaning it up and making it electric. But Newsom did say he would replace the EV rebate with state money. Not sure where he's going to get that exactly. Clean energy, just some threats again. We're on the cusp of really moving forward on clean offshore wind leases, some of which have already been granted off the coast, the north coast near Humboldt, and then off the central coast near Morro Bay, which is a little bit further behind. But the leases have been granted, so it's unclear whether they're going to be able to move forward if the federal government completely pulls out of offshore wind, which is what Trump has said he would do. And fossil fuels would be favored over clean energy. And we have a lot of public land in California. 47% of California's land is owned or controlled by the federal government, either Bureau of Land Management, National Parks, National Forests. So they could try to open drilling in that. And just finally, California sends way more money in taxes to the US government than we get back in federal spending. But we do need the federal government to be a partner for all kinds of things. And that probably won't be there, especially for healthcare and education. Next slide. Okay, so we also are the state with the largest percentage of immigrants. We're actually all immigrants except for Indigenous people, but recent immigrants in the last maybe 50 years, 10.3 million Californians are immigrants. And one of the issues we were just talking about at the XCOM tonight was committing ourselves to writing a statement and a call to action that the Sierra Club stands with our immigrant communities and fleshing out what that could look like. So that will be coming down to the chapters. In fact, some of it's coming up to us from the chapters. We're already discussing it. So if you're interested in that, we can kind of have a conversation. So that we are going to do something both with National, telling National they need to speak out on this more, and in California. Next slide. I think I'm almost done. Sorry, this is going a little bit longer.
No, you're great.
Okay. All right. So California, I know a lot more about California Sierra Club response and work than I do about national, and this really engages our local and state entities, chapters, issue committees for developing strategies and actions, and honestly, building on the work we're already doing. I mean, the presentation you just heard about zero waste, that should be able to move forward. And we want to build on the solutions our chapters and our state staff and leaders are already working on, and keep California moving forward on those. So build more clean energy, stop more fossil fuels. Use this 4 years to do that. We can strengthen our state legislative and regulatory work and reinvigorate. There's actually going to be a pilot which San Diego chapter has signed on to reinvigorate and strengthen our in-district lobbying. And actually, you just talked about that before, about working with your legislators locally.
Yes.
So that's, we can build on the things we're already doing and keep doing them and get more and more people involved in them and feel supported. Our political committees are probably going to be put up to a bigger workload, and getting volunteers gearing up for the all-important 2026 races, so we can try to at least win back the House in 2026. And that work, as political committee people know, goes on pretty much all the time. Our local and progressive environmental and environmentally oriented elected officials in cities and counties and our local agencies, they are going to need help. We need them and they need us, because they're going to need help, boots on the ground, education, outreach to people understand kind of the stakes of moving some of these environmental and climate policies forward. And they will probably appreciate that at this point in time. And calling on them, hey, nothing's going to, the federal government's going to be a big problem for the next 4 years, but our state, local, county agencies really have to step up and do this work. And I think that really means investing in coalition work with our reinvesting. I know everybody already does this. And this is an opportunity where all of our nonprofit organizations are going to be feeling like under pressure and stressed out. So I think by working together and strengthening our coalition efforts and supporting one another and breaking down some of those silos will really be helpful and necessary. And communications, I already talked on the media part, but we really need new ideas and approaches to communicate effectively to people in this period where people are going to need both accurate information and support for thinking things through and planning actions and taking them on. So I really think that's going to be very important. And your chapter and group ideas are going to be a big part of bringing that to the forefront and figuring it out creatively. Next slide. So just this is the last slide before we open it up to questions or hopefully some discussion. I talked about this fire hose of information, disinformation, overwhelming you. So if anybody read Naomi Klein's book, Shock Doctrine, that's kind of what it's being compared to. So when a disaster happens, everybody's trying to respond and help one another. Meanwhile, big corporations or wealthy people come in, buy land up underneath people, and take more power away from them. So if overwhelming people is the goal, what do we do? And this sociologist kind of laid out some really practical and I think helpful strategies for us to use both individually, but in organizations like the Sierra Club. Like, instead of responding, I think this one is really good. Instead of responding right away, wait 48 hours before reacting to new policies. So there was this big thing from Office of Management and Budget. We're going to stop all the funding to everybody. And in 48 hours, it's gone. They had to pull it back. So just some things to, think about. They want you scattered. Our focus is our resistance. Next slide. So that's kind of a scatter shot of some of the things that we're starting to see, we have coming up ahead of us. I think this is going to come in waves. This meaning the Trump administration, the people around him getting their feet underneath them and pushing out really, really bad policies and actions and communication that just, blows people away and makes people really depressed. So, and feel like we can't do anything. So I think in California, we can do a lot, even though we are still absorbing the pain and the worry, especially with our immigrant communities in California. That's real. And I think that's going to get a lot worse than what we're seeing right now. So we do have to prepare ourselves for that. So I'm going to stop and just open it up for comments.
Well, one thing I'd like to add that we've sort of talked around regarding just locally our situation, it is encouraging that our San Diego chapter is a very active chapter, and both of our groups, our North County Coastal and our North County Inland, are very active. Harold, our political committee chair, has organized a very strong team around, doing endorsements and reaching out to electeds. And I will say, since the election in our coastal area here, our 5 cities, we have been regularly reaching out to our friendly council members and, offering support. How can we help? Just in enhancing the dialogue. Also, at the chapter level, we're fortunate that we have a good sized budget. We have a very strong legal committee. Our chapter is currently involved in, I think, something like 12 lawsuits around the county, mostly to do with land use issues. But we do have resources that aren't necessarily available to other chapters. So that's an encouraging thing for us locally. And I think that the point, that you're making when you look and see, like, okay, it's so overwhelming, this fire hose of things coming at us. When you take a minute and focus on something like Ron was talking about with zero waste, or any of the other local issues that are important to all of us and our quality of life, and you realize, okay, we can still do that. There's no reason why we can't. So it's just important to keep that perspective, I think, as we're moving forward. And another thing, I'm sure most of you saw the video of Bishop Marianne Buddy during the inaugural service. If you haven't, Google it. It's the most inspirational thing you'll ever see of someone, talking truth to power. And to hear someone like that directly confront an entire room in such a, humble and sincere way was really hopeful and encouraging. And you see that there's all sorts of people around that that do stand up and do push back. It's not necessarily always the ones who are screaming the loudest on Fox News, right? So I thought there was an interesting quote. She did an interview on NPR the other day, and at the end of it, she was talking about maintaining hope. And she said, you know, we don't get to choose the times we live in, but we live in the times that we're given. And so, you know, it's easy to sort of say, I'm just going to cover my ears and not listen to this. I can't take it. You know, just the challenge that we're all set to confront now. And, you know, in any small action is an important action. So those are just things that have resonated with me lately. But I do see a few things in the chat. Paige, I see you have a question. You're muted. Oops.
Yes, my question, one of them is that I know some of these big oil companies are going to think that 4 years from now, whatever, you know, green cards are given are going to be rescinded. So I'm just wondering if there's any hope that they won't follow through on some of these opportunities to drill, baby, drill. I don't know. What's your thoughts on that?
I actually do a lot of oil and gas work. So I do think California is pretty far along. We still use a lot of oil and gas in California, but we are also pretty far along in having a way to move off of that. So I do agree with you that I think they may see this as, you know, 4-year interlude. But I want to be a little bit provocative here. What we're seeing with the Trump administration is not a change of a presidential administration like we'd usually see. These people do have plans for overtaking, dismantling the government. And, you know, it's up to us to all together and with millions of people across the country to make sure they don't get away with that, because democracy is at risk here. And they will dismantle as much of it as they can permanently. The goal is to do it permanently. And so I'm a little bit cautious about thinking in 4 years we're going to bounce back. This is from a climate perspective, this is a critical 4 years. We're going to be on the doorstep of 2030 when this administration is done. And to meet our climate goals and to offset, you know, worse catastrophes, we have to make progress during this period. So the fights against oil in California are well engaged. They are kind of on, you know, not the run, but they aren't winning very much. They spend a lot of money in Sacramento, more than almost any other lobby sector. So we'll see. But you raise a good point. The counter to that is that the offshore wind companies may also walk away from their investment before they try to put more money into it, because they can't sit around for 4 years.
Michael.
Yes, so I wanted to underline something that both you, Sally, and Kathy talked about, and that's the importance of local leadership in the next 4 years. As some of you already know, the position I came from to take this job in San Diego was with the United Nations Environment Management Group, and I've never worked in a more dysfunctional place, right? We can't necessarily look to, you know, the international leadership to lead on these things. We can't definitely not look to national leadership. And that underscores the importance of what we do in our local chapters and at the local level. So yes, we have a lot of capacity here in San Diego. We have a lot of really good things going on, but we can always use more engagement. We can always use, you know, 1 hour a week from 5 more people. So if you are interested in looking for more opportunities to get involved, to show up, to talk to our local legislators and city council people, please get in touch.
And you have a local person who just got appointed to the CARB board, the California Air Resources Board. Todd Gloria, they announced today, is the new local government representative on the CARB board. So that's the Climate Central for California policy. So Todd can be an ally and somebody to work with.
Right. It's going to make that race, our next congressional race is going to be so critical with Mike Levin. But anyway, Paige.
Okay, I was just going to speak to that issue. I'm fortunate to be in Mike Levin's district, and he's a great guy. And yes, we need to support him, but I think our members also need to be aware that even if you have a progressive representative, it might behoove the Sierra Club and you as an individual to be working in other districts because that majority at the national level is so critical. And I'm not sure people get that walk across the border to another city who has a different rep, maybe a more conservative rep. And I would hope that the Sierra Club could get involved early so that they know what the potential candidates are in those districts and maybe drum up more support to help them out. Anyway, that's it.
Michael.
Yes, this is something we're actively talking about within the chapter is, we've done really incredible work. You've already talked about everything Harold's done when it comes to endorsements. But trying to think forward to 2026 to say, okay, can we get out ahead of the endorsement process to some extent to look at, who are the people, already out there and how can we be involved in candidate recruitment? And once we've made endorsements, also leverage our manpower to knock on doors, make phone calls, and try to make a difference, both on the congressional level, but also strategically in city councils and on the board of supervisors as well.
Yeah, and to that point, it's also really critical to be out with small opportunities and big opportunities, speaking at city council meetings. I know in particular our Oceanside and Carlsbad teams are permanent fixtures in the council meetings. And over the years, that's worked. They've made huge headway in what were traditionally very conservative councils, which are now starting to change. And that's been really critical in making a lot of changes for the better for a lot of our environmental initiatives. But every opportunity, whether it's submitting just an article just to the little local paper, to speaking in the beginning of meetings where, you can just come and talk about whatever you want. It's important that people understand, what's at stake and what the opportunities are to get involved. And Bob accurately mentions my better half join a local commission, as he has joined the planning commission in Encinitas. But there's all sorts of ways that that people can get involved and start to get this information out there without having to be on a giant microphone all the time. I don't know if there's any other questions, let me know. But certainly our teams in Carlsbad and Oceanside have been very busy lately. Barbara, maybe you could just highlight a couple of things that you guys have been working on.
Sure. Yeah. And you're right. We go to city council meetings and commission meetings and we encourage everybody to do that. And I put in the chat a PDF of some of the highlights of what we're working on for the next few months. We're already planning our Earth Day booth, and that's going to be a lot of fun. We'd love to have more volunteers join us and with getting the Earth Day booth together. We're working on the general plan update for Oceanside. That general plan draft they've been working on it for the last few years. That's going to set the development plans for our city for decades to come. Part of the general plan is the climate action plan. And of course, all the land use issues that we work on are affected by the general plan. There will be a workshop in a couple of months for this at the city council on the general plan. We are encouraging Sierra Club members to come. We have all plenty of information to give people that are getting started that want to get involved in something like that. Also on Tuesday, we're having the Climate Action Plan Committee meeting, which we have monthly. I have information about that in the chat on that PDF. And we're also always looking for individuals that are interested in getting involved on a single issue, like non-toxic herbicides and pesticides in our schoolyards and our parks and playgrounds. How well is our new ban on plastics and foam being implemented in Oceanside? So those are some of the things that we would love to have people join us. And along the line of what we heard about how important it is to give each other support, Susie Sherrod is working on organizing some outings for the coasters where we would do something like a hike or a bike ride and then come back together and have a social gathering with a potluck. And I think that would be we need each other for that as well.
Thank you. Paige, did you have anything you want to add about Carlsbad?
Yeah, I can. The update from Carlsbad is that the city passed their updated climate action plan in November, and unfortunately, we weren't successful in getting the building electrification measures included in that for new construction. We had a lot of pushback from realtors and apartment owners and the businesses, and even though we had a pretty good turnout and public comments from the residents, we only got one vote not to include those, so that was too bad. But right now we're working on hope with the city, hopefully to encourage them to develop a solar grid and battery project at one of our local reservoirs. Anyway, just trying to get that off the ground, as well as look at a safety center microgrid that's been under consideration for years. And then more recently, we've come out in opposition about opening up more drive-throughs in Carlsbad. The city put a moratorium, a cap on about 12 or 13 at the end of the 90s. And now they're considering lifting that cap. I'm sure it's coming from business owners. But we're fighting that right now too. So, and then lastly, we've been working for many years, Diane Nygaard and Preserve Calavera and other groups, about the open space in Carlsbad. In '86, we passed a measure that kind of codified that, well, not quite, that we were supposed to have 40% open space in Carlsbad, and we're at 38%, and many of the city people think that that's close enough, but it still amounts to hundreds of acres. So we're working on that on an ongoing basis. So that's, anyone's interested in helping out, let me know.
Yes, and I just want to say thank you, Paige, for taking us through that. A quick thank you to Kathy for her outstanding presentation. She's been on meetings all day and literally like left another meeting to jump onto our meeting. So no rush for anybody. We can stay on and chat a bit, but I wanted to thank her for sharing this presentation. And if it's okay with you, I mean, we have a recording of this meeting, but we would love to include your presentation if that works. If not, we can talk about it later if you want to,
That's fine. I mean, it's going to keep changing.
Right. Right. But thank you. Feel free to jump off. Go to bed.
Thank you so much. Nice to see you all.
Yeah. I want to mention in Encinitas, we've been doing a lot of work on on sort of smaller ways of getting at things like mature tree ordinances and a native plant initiative, where we actually got funding from the city council to do a demonstration garden to help educate people and encourage more natives. We're trying to get an ordinance passed that would increase the percentage of native plants on large projects like all of these big by right developments and things. And so sometimes it's like down to the nitty gritty details of like, okay, we can't get a big thing passed, but we can get small things through that help improve, some of the situation we're in. We do have a very active political committee, as I've mentioned, but certainly in Encinitas, we do need to make a push to sort of bring the band back together. We used to have a very strong community choice energy team in place here, and now we're sort of like project by project going through. But a goal for me I would love to see us develop the same kind of, action teams like we're seeing in Carlsbad and Oceanside. We've been resting on our laurels here because it's been so easy in Encinitas, but we've got a change in the city council, so that might not be the same going forward. And our group is sort of like takes over issues in Solana Beach and Del Mar as well, with a few key people there. As those cities are smaller, you just don't have like the massive amounts of volunteers, but still very, very critical, especially with the transportation issue that's on the table regarding moving the tracks and tunneling and all of those things. Lots going on. I did put my email in the chat for those of you that don't know how to get a hold. And I think, we're going to send some follow-up information, and certainly anyone's free to contact me if they want to be connected with someone on our team.
I would like to just put another plug in for a monthly event. I would like to see a monthly outing. And I think that during that monthly outing, we can do outreach to try to increase the numbers, because when we look at our area, we have so many environmentally oriented people, and they would love to be involved with Sierra Club, but we only meet quarterly right now. I think if we have a monthly outing where it's kind of a fun event and maybe a potluck and more social, it would be very great way to encourage more people to start getting involved with us and to volunteer.
That's a great point, Susan. And Carl, I don't know if you're still on. He's with was originally on our board when we launched a number of years back, Carl Pope, but he's also on the outings committee. He's gone through the training and can lead official Sierra Club outings, which is really great. So I think he's probably jumped off, but we can definitely talk to Carl too about helping us with that. We do, by the way, meet monthly. Our executive committee, it's typically the third Wednesday of each month. Am I getting that right? Because we've
No,
changed
it's the fourth, I believe.
the fourth. Okay, it's the fourth. It's changed a bit here and there, but we try to stay on that. So certainly if someone wants the link, we're doing it by Zoom right now. So if someone wants the link, reach out to me. I'm happy to include you in the meeting. If you have like an issue you want to bring up or just want to sit and listen to what we're talking about, that's fine too. Michael.
Yes, so to Susan's point, one of the initiatives that we're hoping to start at some point this year is bringing together outings with an advocacy orientation. I'm currently going through the training to get outings leader certified. So that's in the pipeline to some extent. We're still working on it. Don't want to overpromise and underdeliver, but hopefully at some point towards the summer or the fall, we'll begin to have opportunities to not only do outings and get outside, but also kind of learn about what we're doing at the chapter level through that medium.
Yeah, that's great. I'll be looking forward to outings with Michael.
Also, I'll say, you know, it's just a small step from saying somebody ought to do something to doing it yourself, or pitching in and helping making it happen. That's the such a small thing to do, but that's where the rubber hits the road. That's how things get done. Is going taking that step. And then outings and
I completely terms of a
anything like
monthly thing. Nature Center would be a good place to meet up and just a little hike. There's already a Saturday farmer market that happens every Saturday morning, and it's nearby. I mean, even if we just hiked along over to that farmer market and then back over to the nature center, we would be able to pick up trash as we walk. We would be able to discuss current events. We could do bird ID, anything that we really wanted to do on those little short walk. And it would be a fast thing, something that doesn't take us a lot of time to walk over and walk back, yet it would be consistent every month, maybe even more often for some people.
Right. I will say, by the way, Mark, maybe you have insight on this. I tried to go around the trail at San Alejo the other day, and it's totally flooded. But hopefully that'll change soon. I don't know if they have to dredge again.
they do have to dredge again. They're gonna start.
It's flooded because they have to open the inlet. It's right now filled with silt, and they are going to be working on it in February. They are going to be dredging it. They have the money for it, and they will be opening that back up.
Yeah, the equipment arrives February 14th. So over the next couple of months, after that month or two, it'll open up.
Yeah, yeah. It's beautiful there. By the way, if you haven't been, you need to go. Bob, you've been throwing lots of things at me via text and on the chat, but yes, we're very involved in South County, and Charles from our chapter, who is not here, um, has been leading that effort. There's also issues at the Tijuana River Valley. So countywide, there's all sorts of things going on that are really critical for the region. But specifically coasters, someone was asking, are Del Mar and Solana Beach part of the coasters? Yes, it's Del Mar, Solana Beach, Encinitas, Carlsbad, Oceanside. And we do have several folks from Del Mar that are on our political committee. They've also been very involved in electrification. We have very friendly city council members in Solana Beach and a few in Del Mar as well. So there's a nice group of people to work with there. But we always are looking for more people to get involved from those folks. So please save the chat. I see Harold's listed his email, and it's now 8:40, which I feel like is a really long time for a Zoom meeting. So I don't know if there's anything else.
Yes, Sally.
Yeah.
I'd like to give a pitch for the political committee. We're having a meeting a week from tonight on Zoom, starting at 6:30. I dropped my email in the chat, as Sally said. If you're interested in attending, contact me and I'll make sure that you get the Zoom link.
Yeah, and that's a bunch of us on our executive committee are on that committee. That is a fun group to be involved with. It's so interesting. It's really interesting to use that as a way to meet with elected officials, but also to get involved with the election process and endorsements. It's pretty fascinating. And as we all know, there's nothing more important than elections. So a very critical piece of what we do here. So with that, I'm trying to look to see if there's anyone else with a hand up, but I appreciate everybody hanging in for the long meeting and all the work that everybody does. It's really great. So thank you.
Have a good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Sally. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.
Hi, Barbara.
Good night. Hi, Marie. I'm so glad you made it.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, Susie.
Good to see you, Susie.
All right, I'm gonna close the